Thank you. Hi, I am Sarah Darling, Deputy Director of Corporate Services for the City of Port Alberni. And today, with Donna Lundy's departure, I am stepping into her role for the time being. Thank you.
And I'm Cindy Solda. I'm a city councillor for the City of Port Alberni, and I am the chair of the Accessibility Committee. Okay, next.
Christine Cardonahue, Administrative Assistant at the ACRD.
Amber Severinson, volunteer.
Okay, let's go. Thank you. And let's go online. How about if we start with Deanna?
I'm Deanna Spencer. I'm an employment counselor, have been for 16 years, and I live with MS.
Thank you. And Beta? You're muted, and I hope I pronounced your name right. Just tell me if I didn't.
Thank you. Yes, you pronounced my name right, and I'm the Area C Director for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District and a representative on the Accessibility Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kara?
Kara Wilkie, I work with Left Turn, Right Turn, the consulting firm that's been working with the ACRD and the city on their first accessibility plans.
And Jamie? Jamie, you're muted. Don't hear you.
Not sure.
We hear you now.
Okay, you hear me now? Jamie Tadry, Accessibility Member Committee.
Maybe come a little closer to your mic because we can't hear your volume is down.
I wonder if it's. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I've got volume coming in and microphone going out. Jamie Tadry. I am a member of the Accessibility Committee here.
Thank you. Nicole?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicole Uzelman. I am the Executive Director for the Port Alberni Association for Community Living.
And Haley?
Hi there, I'm Haley. I work with Kara Wilkie at Left Turn, Right Turn, and I'm also supporting ECRD with its accessibility planning project.
Super. And Helen, good morning, Helen. Could you introduce yourself? Hi, you're wondering where my voice is. Could you introduce yourself to everybody?
I'm Helen. I'm from the Tishads.
Thank you, Helen. Nice to see you. All right, everybody, let us carry on. Could we have approval of the agenda? Oh, and anybody want to add anything? Feel free to at this moment. So moved by Veda and second? And second by Nicole. Anybody have any declarations? Anybody suddenly got a $1 million gift they want to declare or anything like that? We wish. Okay, I see none. And Accessibility Committee meeting held March 5th. Approval of the minutes. Somebody wanted to moved by Veda and second? Do I have a second? Oh, sorry. Deanna. Second by Deanna. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Correspondence? Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I just attached the news article from the Alberni Valley News highlighting that the city and the regional district are working together on this accessibility initiative. And there was a picture included of the committee from our first meeting. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thanks.
Thank you. And correspondence for information? Heather?
That's it.
Well, that was easy. Okay, let's go to discussions. Let's just flip it over. And Heather, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, we'll just actually pass it over to Haley. She's going to go over the preliminary results of the survey, which closed last week.
Haley, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Just gonna get my Screen share. Alrighty, so what you should be seeing now is a title slide that says Accessibility Committee Consultation with LTRT, and we will proceed. So today we're going to be discussing with you the public survey results. So you'll recall at the last meeting we chatted about some wording in the survey, some missed opportunities, different groups that we needed to capture. So thank you for that input. The survey was successfully launched and closed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It was also mentioned last meeting that considerations about attitudes and perceptions around disability and accessibility was an important area of consideration. This did come up quite a bit in the survey, and again, I'll share a bit more about that with you when we go over the results, but I'd like to leave space for that conversation to see what the committee's personal experiences are. So we know that it was an area of interest and focus that was recommended by the committee, but we'd like to hear more feedback and elaboration on your experiences, where those areas of impact are heaviest in your experiences operating in the city and with the region, and perhaps some discussion around how you'd like to see that addressed. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the committee's role in the next phase of planning. So I'll turn that over to Heather and Sarah maybe to help facilitate that conversation, because next month will be at least Left Turn Right Turn's last chance to meet with the committee and to give some good direction to the eventual accessibility plans that come out of this consultation work. So we'll want to talk a little bit about what that will look like. And then a question and answer period to address anything that comes out of the conversations that we have today and any additional questions or insights you might have. So just to refresh your memory, although we did introductions today, there are two of us here today from Left Turn Right Turn. So we're an independent accessibility consulting firm that's been retained by the city and the region to support with accessibility planning, which is a requirement under the Accessible British Columbia Act. So both the city and the region have a responsibility to publish separate accessibility plans that address barriers across their operations and within the organization. So Kara is the project director and the principal lead here at LTRT, and I'm the project manager and an accessibility specialist. Both of us have done dozens of accessibility plans at both the federal and provincial level at this point. So in terms of the public survey results, we got fairly good traction. So there were 108 respondents, which is pretty typical for this type of engagement and this type of project. Of course, because it is targeted to a specific demographic, we like to think that accessibility impacts everybody. It does. Not everybody sees it that way. So we were pleased with the uptake of the survey. In terms of who was responding, 27 people identified as having a disability, and then 32 responded that they were close to somebody with a disability. So over half of the people that took the survey had a personal connection to disability where it was really impactful and meaningful in their lives. Would we have preferred a higher representation of people with disabilities? Of course, but this is where the numbers stand. What was interesting to me, though, and I think this is really important, an important data point, is that almost half of the respondents came from people in the ages of 31 to 54. So we have often seen it trend actually a little bit older for municipal engagement with other surveys that we've done. And so I think this is really telling that people who are, actively employed and engaged and kind of people who are invested in the community, have roots in the community, but also have sort of longevity in terms of their lifespan, not just like literal lifespan, but their lifespan is like contributors, people who are actively involved in all aspects of civic life, were half of the respondents. And then the other demographic that was highly represented were seniors in a close second. I think there were 33 respondents who identified in the seniors category. So that's kind of where we're hearing from, probably people who are sort of most in kind of the prime of their lives in the community, and then people who are seniors and aging who are probably experiencing a higher level of age-related disabilities, just to give you an idea of what that background looks like. So in terms of the major themes that emerged, the top two very close aligned were around municipal facilities and infrastructure, so municipal buildings specifically, which we already know from visiting the area and through kind of doing built environment assessments, what some of those accessibility barriers are. But what this confirmed for us is that the community feels that these are impactful barriers. So for some communities, you know, maybe it applies more to the employees of municipal facilities, especially like, you know, City Hall and whatnot. And there's not as much community engagement where those barriers are impactful, but they're reflecting to us that these barriers are impactful to them. And so whether it's just for needs like, you know, getting support with information, paying taxes, other sort of municipal services, or whether it's, we know that, you know, elections are held at the fire hall or community hall. And so these are areas where people are seeing that impact. There was also a lot of commentary about outdoor spaces, so parks in particular and pathways. So just being able to recreate in the community, that experience, people noted a lot of barriers there. A lot of consideration was talked about with, you know, playgrounds and public parks specifically. So interestingly, that those two areas were talked about most often or identified as major themes for people. I think because, you know, in my perception, I'm just saying that this is surprising to me. The municipal facilities, of course, sometimes the community can feel detached from those spaces, that they're not personally relevant, but they did feel that they were. And then with outdoor spaces, because this may impact, you know, more families or a younger demographic, but because we saw almost half of the respondents coming from people who are kind of probably in that prime parenting age, that these recreational spaces were really important to them. And then following that, about equal to each other, but quite a bit lesser than responses around municipal facilities and outdoor spaces, were attitudes and perceptions. So as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, the committee's feedback was really helpful in highlighting that. So I'm glad we drew attention to that in the survey, that this was actually largely around customer service at municipal facilities or through municipal employees, that they felt that attitudes and perceptions around accessibility and just general kind of customer friendliness, sensitivity and awareness in customer service were areas in need of improvement. And so, you know, are these the few grumpy people that have had bad experiences chiming in? You know, there is some element of that, but certainly I think everybody benefits from additional levels of training and thought about how to engage with the public. And then, like I said, sort of tied with feelings about attitudes and perceptions was the focus on transportation infrastructure. So this related a lot to sidewalks and parking. So things like curb cuts, width of sidewalks. There was discussion of root systems and uprooting of sidewalks. So uneven surfaces for people who either use mobility devices that can't navigate those surfaces easily, or perhaps people who are unsteady in their gait, wanting, you know, better sidewalks and infrastructure. Accessible parking was another issue that came up quite a lot in front of public spaces and in buildings. Interestingly, though, there was a lot of commentary about active transportation. And I'm just saying this is interesting because sometimes the way active transportation infrastructure is built is at odds with, or is seemingly at odds with some accessibility needs of the community if those things aren't planned in tandem. And so how do floating islands and bus shelters and bike lanes and curb cuts, how do all of those things merge and support each other instead of acting in conflict? But didn't see a lot of feedback about those things existing in conflict, which we have in the past in other communities. What we saw is just that there was a lack of active transportation infrastructure. So, you know, how we interpret that as an accessibility barrier, we'll give some more thought to that. I will say that there were, you know, there was a decent chunk of commentary that wasn't about accessibility. And so sometimes we see this too, that if people feel like they don't have an outlet to talk about community issues generally, once they have a platform to provide their feedback, they go to something like this survey. And so it's a matter of us kind of reading between the lines and saying, this doesn't really seem accessibility related, but is it? Is there something missing? Is there a dot we're not connecting? So I'd like to think through that active transportation piece and see, is it really a comment about, hey, this is just lacking, and you asked me about transportation overall, so I'm going to make this comment, or is there an accessibility connection that we should make? So those are the major themes that have come up through the survey. So I think it really is beneficial, particularly because that attitudes and perception piece, we've heard it from the community and from the committee, that I'm glad we have the time to talk about it today. And so I just want to spend some time talking about, you know, from feedback to plan. how do we translate these findings? So I'll talk a little bit about our process, and then I will also talk about, or kind of put it back to Heather and Sarah to maybe talk a little bit about what the next steps look like. But from LTRT's perspective, this is an iterative process, meaning that we look at accessibility feedback from multiple dimensions and then connect the dots between what are the things that we're consistently hearing. Does this make sense? So we have had the opportunity, as I think we mentioned in the last meeting, to review documents, internal documents, policies, processes, things like that from the city and the region that tell us about accommodations practices, employment policies, leave policies, or even just things like plans around municipal planning that deals with parks and rec and active transportation. So we look at kind of on paper what's going on or what's supposed to be going on. But then we've also talked with staff from both the city and the region about what the experience is like. So we know there's sometimes a disconnect between the ideal state and the reality, and there's all kinds of logistical challenges for people doing work that is, so important and so busy. And so we're able to talk to staff about what are the challenges you've experienced, what are challenges you've seen your constituents experience when it comes to accessibility. How did these aspects of your operations run, and where could they be more accessible? Taking that information, then of course we consulted with the committee last month to get more insight into what is the public experience and perception, you as sort of representatives or stand-ins for the wider community. We took your feedback and incorporated it into the survey. Now we've heard from a wider range of community members. And so taking all of that information together, then, like I said, we sort of cross-analyze these things and say, okay, here are the things that are consistently coming up. Here's how they've been validated. We've heard it from more than one person through more than one channel in more than one way. And so again, there were a couple of entries into the survey that I noticed that talked about customer service. How often did that come up? Maybe not as often as something that I would flag as a major area of concern, but something where we could say, okay, in general though, sensitivity, accessibility, training may be valid. So we take what rises to the surface as the most consistent and most important issues with accessibility for people who work in the region and for the municipality and people who live there and spend their lives there. And then we try to find practical recommendations that can be actioned within the life of this plan. So I'll refresh your memory and let you know that these accessibility plans have a life cycle of 3 years. And so even though there's feedback that's very useful that we've received now that will certainly be documented, it may also not be practical to address that feedback directly or to totally solve that problem. And so we look to making solutions that will start to tackle the problem, if not totally solving it. So that's the mindset that we're going into right now. That's the phase of our project work that we're at, logging all of this information and identifying the barriers and then being pragmatic about the solutions to ensure, the best chance for building capacity and maximum accessibility over the next 3 years with the resources and timelines available. So I will pause there and let Heather and Sarah just, if there's any commentary or feedback or thoughts about as we move into this, later stage phase of the plan, if there are any areas of consideration. So I'll stop sharing for a moment and pass the mic over.
Thanks, Haley. My initial comment is I was surprised at the age range of the participants in the survey. Most of our participants in a lot of our surveys are the older demographic, so it was interesting to see a younger demographic participate in this survey. Yeah, and I think it'll be important for us to review the survey results, with the city and with yourselves, the consultant, to come up with the recommendations on how we take the survey results and take the input from this committee and create our accessibility plans. I think that's really the next step. But yeah, I don't really have any further comments at this time, and I'll pass it to Sarah if she's got anything to add at this point.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, just coming into the committee and this being my first meeting, I'm just trying to take all the information and integrate it. But what I can say is echo Heather's comments about the age range. I just think it's so great. Typically that range as well, as you mentioned, Haley, they're going to cover the demographic of the children because a lot of them will have families during that time. But I just thought for myself as well, they have the lens of most of us in that age group do have elderly parents or family that we're thinking of as well. So it's a really diverse approach that they're able to take in the survey findings. And as far as the integration and just how we translate the findings, I know myself just coming from the city side of things, already thinking about those key areas that you found and just what I know we're doing in the city that's going to help align or complement those gaps in service. So looking forward to digging in and seeing more about that. Thank you.
I kind of would like to open it up to the floor, to anybody who has any comments or questions or additions. And so let's first go to Beta. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually not surprised at the demographic of the survey, given my experience on the West Coast. The lack of secondary and tertiary healthcare services means that we have to travel to access those services. And as we age out on the West Coast, people can no longer drive to the services independently. If they don't have family or friends to get them to those services, they literally have to move to the South Island or East Island. And I'm in that age demographic now where I have family, I'm lucky, but many of my friends have had to move just purely for that transportation accessibility to the services that are not accessible. And I would imagine Port Alberni residents would have to travel as well. And the reality is that buses and ferries require long walks and stairs. And so if you do not live close to the services that you require, you just literally are not getting the health services you need. So I think the younger demographic are the ones that are present working and experiencing difficulties that they are working around, whereas a senior, they're trying to figure out how to adapt. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting because there's a motion going to the ABICC about having an accessibility committee over our rural committee for health and that the city of Port Alberni has put forward, and it'll be a late resolution. So look forward to that and maybe pass it on to your council. And that's regarding to have a caucus group through the UBCM to do with rural seniors committee. So that's really important. And that came out of a study that was given by the seniors, provincial seniors advocacy office. So look forward to that. I do know there's a lot of issues, and I don't know if the Island Link helps with movement regarding accessibility to appointments out of the West Coast. So I'm just kind of curious, Beta, if that helps at all, or is it just not there?
It sounds like we're identifying very similar issues. I mean, these issues were brought up when there was the whole Closer to Home initiative in the 1980s, and it just seems like we're recircling, but nothing has been done. So I'm glad to hear that the resolution is being put forward. Thank you so much.
And you'll find it in your late resolution book too, just take a look because it's there. So anyways, anybody else have a question or comment? So I have a couple of comments if nobody else has one right at this moment. My questions are so as communities go forward and with changing accessibility and everything for their community, how do we track that? I know it's a 3-year program, but how do we track that? Can we send out more surveys? And I can do questions one at a time, or I can do it all together. I'll do one at a time, probably easier, because I tend to go off and off and off.
I think for us in the city, like our accessibility plans have a 3-year term on them. So they're going to highlight some recommendations. And this committee will be monitoring those recommendations. So I think it's going to be like an ongoing tally. And I think at the end of the 3 years, we'll assess where we are with the things that we had, set as priorities. And then the next 3-year plan will set future priorities. So I think the plan and this committee will help to track that.
Super. And it's really great because we need to keep on that. This whole committee needs to be involved in that. Now, the other one is a region. So we had 108 respondents to the survey, but I'm kind of curious to know do we have an idea of how many were actually from our Port Alberni and how many from the West Coast? Because that's really important to know that too, because as Veda has said, there's issues in the West Coast, but it would be great to know, do we have an idea?
Yeah, I'd have to dive back in to get the numbers, but thank you for addressing that, because that was another interesting element of the survey, was that definitely the majority of respondents identified as being from Port Alberni specifically. So that's most engagement came from there. And if I recall off the top of my head, I'm going to say about 2/3 engagement from Port Alberni, but I would have to go back and look at that. But I did notice a big spike there.
That's interesting. Okay, and the other question is, so I agree with the survey, all the answers to the survey. I know Port Alberni has a lot of issues, like just with poles and planters in the way, and so our sidewalks are lean when you take if somebody's in a wheelchair or in a cart, and you watch them go by a light and they're halfway off the sidewalk. And we have wide streets. We could do better. But then the cars and all the vehicles go, well, hey, no, we like that racing track we have, and we can go down 4 lanes and we can do whatever we want. And we've heard this because we wanted to narrow the streets in the past. And everybody, no, don't do that to our Argyle. I love it when I can go straight down like a racing car. So I agree with you. Our Key to Key project will have accessibility, like one side will be for wheelchairs and different things like that, bikes and stuff like that. And we're working towards that. But again, we get a lot of kickback on that because people want, no way, why are we making everything so wide? So that's another thing. My question is, like, basically the cost. There's a lot of costs involved. Like if you want to widen your sidewalks and stuff, and you're going to have to do it as you do repairs or something like that, and work on that way. But is there help out there? Is there government grants that could help municipalities, West Coast, Port Alberni, with accessibility infrastructure costs?
So the approach that we usually take when we're supporting clients is, one, to capitalize on pre-existing opportunities. And so presumably you have budgeted for regular sidewalk maintenance, regular infrastructure repair. And so what we would do is recommend that you highlight accessibility as a key component to these repairs, upgrades, updates, and changes. It's certainly not, as us as consultants who live outside of the community to say, widen this sidewalk, period. Although I'm sure some members of the community would like us to be able to do that. It's not practical, and we know that it wouldn't pass with your councils. So really what it is about is saying, okay, these are the improvement plans that we have. These are the community plans, the active transportation plans, the official community plan, things like that, to build and prioritize accessibility into those things so that as soon as the funds, the procedures, the resources are in place, it's top of mind, it gets built in. And so that at the very, very least, you're fixing old barriers and you're never creating new ones as these things go along. So that's the, easiest and foremost approach. There are, different government and municipal grants for accessibility improvements. They're region project specific. So I'm not going to try to rattle off any of those at the moment, but that is certainly something to consider. Something else that may not go into, well, it could go into our accessibility plan under kind of that attitudes and perceptions notion is working with business communities. And so if you have a chamber of commerce, some businesses, it's in their interest to help contribute to improving infrastructure in and around their business to increase their customers. So even looking at the survey results like this, 27 people responded who have disabilities, but another 30 something live with a person with a disability, which means they probably run errands together and go shopping and do appointments. And so there's a large customer base that is negatively impacted by barriers to accessibility. And so, talking to business leaders about changes to their doorways, changes to their parking lots, because some of these things are not municipally controlled or owned. And so that's, part of that relationship building. I think the more that we see the region and the municipality prioritizing accessibility and making it sort of an expectation and a public commitment, the more it becomes baked into the culture of the community, and all things will sort of naturally flow from there. So I do want to be clear that for this first accessibility plan, the span of which is 3 years, that it really is talking about getting the policies, the guidelines, the capacity, the infrastructure, and the people, the know-how in place, so that as these improvements come up and as the opportunity exists, it's executed to maximum accessibility, consulting with people with disabilities to ensure that it reflects their needs and is implemented in as smooth a way as possible.
Heather, I see that you want to say something. Go for
Yeah,
it. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to what Haley said about the grants. I have seen some grant opportunities available, but we needed to have the accessibility plan in place first to be eligible. So once we have the plans adopted by our board and by city council, then we'll be available to apply on those grant opportunities. And Haley, that was a good suggestion to present to our local chamber of commerce. We do have an active one in the Alberni Valley as well as Banfield in the West Coast. Because I did see some comments come in the survey, and sometimes they're related to things that we really don't have control over, but they're in the wider community. So we can do our best to educate and share information with the broader community.
That's super. And through the city, you got the bylaws, you got where was I going to go? Master planning that we're doing in the city, so it can all be added, as well as the OCP. I mean, with our parks, we're doing park plans and stuff like that. So that's important. And unfortunately, we were an old mill town, so we were built for workers coming into Port Alberni and doing their thing and leaving Port Alberni. So now we have to look at it. We're more proactive in our community now. So yes, Ada, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was just, hopefully that didn't interrupt your flow. I agree with you when you brought up that our facilities were built for the mill towns. Ours, I believe, were built for the fishing towns, and our municipal building is now, it's great, it's down by the dock, but it's not where people can easily access if they're going down to get their mail or their groceries. So I think, like our older infrastructure, as we start to think about improving it, we're going to have to look at where people gather. And is there a bus stop by the municipal building in Port Alberni? I'm curious.
Yes, there is. We're well covered there. We make sure of that. Anybody else have any questions? No? Go ahead. And let's go to the next topic.
Great. Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for your kind of feedback and I think validating, again, what we hear from the survey. Oh, yes, this makes sense in terms of the community, because as we sort of talked about, sometimes the people who show up to surveys or consultations are the people who, I mean, if you're happy with everything, you're probably, not dialed in. So it's people who are unhappiest who tend to show up. And so just to hear, yep, okay, this all makes sense. This is my experience in the community too, is really helpful. So thanks to everybody for that. So we're going to move into the attitudes and perceptions conversation. So I'm going to share my screen again, but I think, Kara's going to sort of co-facilitate with me. In a way, we're looking at this as a mini focus group or a discussion opportunity to give you the space that you didn't have last time to elaborate on what that means to you, because I will say that through the surveys, again, these tended to look like one-off comments when people were, so there was an area in the survey where they could click the area of impact that was greatest impacted by barriers to accessibility. And so many people selected that attitudes and perceptions around disability and accessibility were an area of large impact. But when it came to writing out comments about what that meant for them, it was a little bit thinner. And so I'd love to hear kind of, filling in the blanks, what this means to you when we talk about attitudinal barriers or attitudes and perceptions. So let me just share my screen again. And here's kind of some comments to stimulate that discussion. But what we're really looking for, and we'll turn the virtual mic or mic over to everybody here, is one, what have been your experiences in the community? So when you say this is a problem, if you can cite examples or areas where this has been a problem. And building on that, where are these attitudinal barriers most prevalent and impactful? And again, trying to think of where these things may be in the municipality or region's control. So, if you've had a lousy experience with your doctor or nurse practitioner, that they're ageist, or, that's unfortunate. And of course, we're open to giving you the space to talk about that, but it's less practical. There are less practical solutions on our side to be able to address those. And then if you have thoughts on how to address these barriers, I think one of the main things that we look to is imagining that the region and the city become kind of the spokespeople, the mouthpiece on your behalf to amplify these concerns. So with the Chamber of Commerce, they don't control the Chamber of Commerce, but they can chime in and they can say, hey, we know that these are priority issues for our community. Here's what we're doing to make them better. Now let's look outward to other movers and shakers in the community to see how they can contribute to more accessibility. And I think even just those conversations and that kind of promotion of those attitudes, the promotion of the positive attitudes helps eliminate the negative attitudes, but you may have more practical solutions. So I'm going to just leave those questions on the screen there for you to think about and respond to. But the first most kind of main prompt is, talk to us about your experiences where you've encountered those attitudes and those negative perceptions that have posed barriers to your life and livelihoods in the community.
All right, who wants to go first? Anybody? Let's take the first topic. What have been your experiences in the community? So anybody want to, Helen, do you want to tell us about your experiences in the community, the accessibility, or have you seen any issues? Just turn on your mic there.
The most common thing that happens is whether it's Walmart or Canadian Tire, anywhere that has a handicap parking spot is taken up by people who don't need it, the able people. They just drive in and park, and you're left without the space for the people who have the handicap sticker on their car, or even women with children park there. And that's quite common in this town. And you tell them you can't park there, but they just tell you to go take a walk somewhere. So the attitude out there in regards to people who legally have a handicap zone parking ticket, they don't have any choice but to park somewhere else where it's not easy for them, especially seniors. Seniors especially. They end up walking quite a ways to get to the door. And more attention needs to be reminded of people who are able, who have two good legs and two good arms, that they need to park somewhere else instead of taking space for people who really need it. That's something I observe quite often.
And can I just ask a follow-up question to you of that?
Yep.
These are vehicles that you're seeing that don't have a sticker? I ask because sometimes there's people who have the sticker, but we don't think have a disability, but they're people who you're seeing the vehicle without a sticker. And so your comment is about either the fact that they're still parking there or that they're not getting tickets for parking there.
See? Do they have it? Yeah, it's a blue car. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I get used to it. It's that blue card that you get from, it's on the avenue, you get what you renew it every 2 years or every 3 years, and then you're supposed to have it on your, on your mirror holder or something, or it's where it's visible.
Right, so they don't have it, is your comment. They're parking there and they don't have it.
They don't have it. They're very healthy looking people, and you can tell it's just wanting to get there closer to the door. And that needs something that's something that I believe should be addressed more. Bring it to the attention of people that you're it's inconveniencing those seniors and those people with handicaps. It make it more stressful for them that they have to park way over there and walk all the way back. So
I would agree with you. I do know people who have those handicap stickers and they should be at the handicap and other people who do park there. I've seen that and I look at them. Is that coming from the city? Do we assign that? So it's from, where do they get those stickers?
Thank you, Chair Solda. I believe they get the tags from Spark BC is the newest. And so it's an application form that you fill out. And so we do provide that link to people who contact.
We have to fill out, an application. It actually gets sent up from Nanaimo, I believe. That's where I've always gotten mine from.
And I do know people who borrow somebody else's sticker so they can get right to the store, right? And I've seen that happen too. And I know people who do that and it's like, really? So that is a problem. And I do know with the handicap too, that some people have issues when you're at a handicap parking, but it's uphill and you're trying to get out the door because you're on the hill and you just can't push that door. You don't have the strength. So, I mean, there's some accessibility issues right there too, but you have no choice. There is no other parking. So anything else, Helen, that you want to bring forward? No? All right. And Amber, what about yourself?
I think the biggest one was when I've had to be in a wheelchair or use a mobility scooter and just trying to get into places and having people help me go down the sidewalks, which I think we've talked a lot about here, the sidewalk. When I've been in a wheelchair, I've had not enough strength. So I think if you're a healthy person and like have enough energy in a wheelchair, it might be easier, but for me it was like really hard. We talked about the sidewalks here a lot. For my son who has more of an invisible disability, and it's not so much the city accessing, but it's more like the provincial services, where it's like you only have one portal and you can only do it this way. And it's like, well, then you need more options. There needs to be more help, and so you can't really access bigger provincial services because you only have one avenue to access it. So I think that's where I've noticed it most in my life. Thanks.
And that's interesting because I agree with you. So much times when you go on the internet and you're entering in a portal and you go, no, there's more to the story. It would be nice to have a miscellaneous or note box where you could type in a little more information. And I can see the frustration.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice that if it wasn't only being able to access it via like that, you have to do online application, being able to go in person and have them help you, things like that. And I've noticed it for other people as well, that applying for PW2, and this is like provincial things. I know it's not in this area, but it is in our community. So if there are cross meetings where you're with other people, it's like, right, this is an issue in our community. We can't deal with it. How can we deal with it?
Understandable. Anything else from you? Okay, Heather.
Yeah, I think that's important, Amber. Even with this survey, I had somebody reach out to me that wasn't very happy with how we advertised this survey. Like it was mostly an online survey. And this person was saying, well, you should have offered it other ways. And I said, well, did offer it through a sign language interpreter, or you could do it on phone. But we didn't advertise that in the Alberta Valley News when we did the advertisement. So I think that that statement is important for us to consider as we're doing engagement with the community. And I agree with you, like online services, like with the province, are very hard. But I think we do a lot of things as well, and we try and do a lot of things online. So I think that is an important statement for us to consider, you know, at the regional district and the city for sure.
It can be overwhelming. I mean, even when you make a phone call and you got press 1, press 2, press 3, and you just want to talk to someone, right? And it gets too much just for some people. So I understand that totally. So let's go to the next person. Oh, Nicole, you're up.
So we're looking at question 1. I probably have about 30 years of experiences working with individuals that have physical and intellectual disabilities, and also just some of my family members. But I think predominantly the experience, I think no matter what the experience is, I could, like I said, I could get into some specifics. But I think that what's really important for the people that we serve within our agency or my family members is that one negative experience. And I think they were talking about that a little bit with the survey results. It takes about, you know, like it's just like a negative feedback or a comment. It takes about 8 positive experiences to erase that. So I think that just most recently, I'll just give this as an example because it's very recent, and I think it's it fits in many categories. As an organization, we purchased a building which is located, and this is an older building, so you step out virtually onto the sidewalk, and it's got, you know, it doesn't have an accessible front entrance. So we put a proposal into the city to, you know, to have a ramp to the front of this building so that people didn't have to go around through the back alley to this one part. And our proposal was turned down, saying that we were going to encroach too far onto the existing sidewalk. And I can understand that if we were encroaching quite a distance. So this building is right at the sidewalk. So I understand that there's more things to it. But I think maybe when we're doing planning, rather than getting the hard no, what about another suggestion on how we might be able to accommodate this for people? So I think that's where I think that people would shut down. We might reapproach it, but I think when people get no, that people start feeling defeated maybe. And it would be nice to have, when we're having those negative experiences, if there's a way that there is more follow-up to, like to the hard no, maybe there's another suggestion, or, you know, or something. That's just my feedback.
Wrong button. Interesting idea. And unless have you tried to do it yourself? Like, okay, for instance, so the hard no comes, and then when you look at it, have you thought of going, well, what if we did it this way, or what do you suggest? Have you asked that question to the city when they do the hard no? Just out of curiosity.
So this is a very recent response, like it's a recent example, and it is a priority for our agency, but these things are in the works for a long time. So our proposal went in quite some time ago. We recently got the response. So it takes rethinking and reworking. And while it's a priority, I will be honest, we have other priorities too. So if, you know, it takes some engineering and some specialty. So when we get to the question about thoughts on barriers, I think I might be able to contribute some ideas. So I'm just going to save my comments for that, so the rest of the committee has an opportunity to speak, if that's okay, Cindy.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to talking more about that little issue. Anyways, let's go to the next person, and let us go to Deanna. I'm just picking random here.
Okay, so what are we wanting to know? What my experience has been in the community as a person with a disability?
That's correct.
Sorry, Deanna, just to clarify, in this particular case, with regarding attitudes and perceptions.
Okay.
So not physical barriers, but experiences that you've had with attitudes and perceptions.
So for me, I haven't really experienced anybody like with a bad attitude towards me. I have actually experienced quite the opposite. I don't go out on my own. I can't drive anymore. So I always have to depend on my husband. So really I only get out of the house every other week because he's in camp. But people have always been very like opening the doors for us, that kind of thing. But what I have noticed, when Helen was talking about people parking in the handicap spots and stuff like that, the attitude, I remember I had parked in a handicap spot with a sticker, but you can't tell that I have a disability just by looking at me. And so when I pulled up, this older gentleman said to me, "You can't park there. You don't have a disability." And I got out with my walking sticks and I said, "Don't tell me I don't have a disability. I have MS." And so I'm a very much, I will give the attitude back because people don't know what other people are going through. I've actually waited for somebody that's been parked in a handicap spot with no sticker that I've seen get out of their vehicle. I've actually waited for them and have confronted them on it because people don't think, they just, oh, I'll be, a few minutes, but you're taking that away from somebody who's physically not capable of doing what you're able to do, whether you're disabled or you're elderly. It's the same as using, accessible washrooms. People will go in there just because it's convenient. And I've called people out on it before because they don't have a disability. You can physically see there's nothing wrong with them. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Well, there's a reason why these spaces and these bathrooms are, allocated for people with disabilities. So yeah, as far as attitude that I've experienced, no, but there's the little things, but I will give the attitude back if needed.
And thank you for that. Any comments? No? Okay, and who am I missing? So, Kara? No. I think I've gotten everybody. Jamie. Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie. Jamie, you're so far away from me in that picture, so go ahead.
That's okay. Can you hear me okay now? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. My personal experience is quite limited. I've only lived in Port Alberni for a couple of years, and I do live with a chronic invisible illness. So I really haven't encountered too many attitudinal issues personally. Yeah, so I don't have too much to say about my personal experience at this point on this topic, but I definitely have some ideas on how to address barriers that maybe other people have been experiencing. So thank you.
And why don't you tell us the thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. I just think that maybe there's a lack of general openness in terms of that accessibility lens and that universal design type perspective where, when Nicole is mentioning this challenge with this ramp, it's like, the city, like the mandate should really be like, okay, how can we say yes to things like accessibility and universal design rather than putting it back on organizations to like go back to the drawing board when they are the one resources, they have multiple projects and aren't necessarily publicly funded. So I think like in terms of that, like changing our perspective to see like, okay, how can we say yes? And that involves like, I think the main component of that is education. Right? If people don't understand like what universal design is, or like design it, like you look around this city, I've only lived here 3 years. I came from Victoria, which is like a whole different ballgame. And it's like, wow, like there are stairs everywhere. Most like public places don't have ramps or elevators. The ARCD building, for example, also doesn't have, is like stairs to the entryway. So like, there's just so much to do, like in terms of addressing it. Like, I think we really need to kind of shift our perspective to seeing like, okay, how can we incorporate this into our plan long-term? And that like, that's the lens we're looking through. And I think education is a big piece of that, whether it's people working at the front counter of the Echo Center or different parts of the municipality that, we can't just assume that people have this knowledge and awareness of what it's like to live with a chronic illness or a disability or need something extra to level the playing field. So I think education is really a big piece in addressing that.
Thank you. And Sarah, I'm sure you have a comment.
Thank you, Chair Solda. Yeah, further to Jamie's comments and Amber's, I really focus on, invisible disabilities or those with social issues being located at City Hall and in corporate services. Our department is the public facing piece of City Hall, and where you get very broad general inquiries, lots of things that aren't related to city services or otherwise. So we really tried to endeavor to, not show up to the public when they attend our office or phone in with any preconceived notions, and just really ensuring that we're meeting people where they are and helping them through the process, whatever that may be. And we've recently just crafted a customer service handbook. So obviously these are things that we're doing every day in all our public facing departments, but just really setting those expectations out and ensuring that whether it be a city service or not, when people are asking for our help, that we're going the extra mile to get them what they need, if it's a provincial service like Amber was mentioning or otherwise. So just making sure, like I say, to meet people where they're at. Thank you.
And thank you, Heather.
Yeah, for me, I supervise the administrative staff who are front-facing staff. So same with what Sarah just said, we get a lot of inquiries about services that we don't actually provide, but we do a lot of help with pointing people in the right direction and giving them extra service. I think Kara said this last meeting, or it might have been one on our separate meetings, but customer service can, address a lot of disabilities or that. So we do try and provide excellent customer service. But I think there's always room for improvement. And I'm sure that one of the recommendations in the plan will be to have staff attend some training so that we can sort of build our knowledge about abilities and disabilities.
Thank you. And what's interesting, if you look back in the 70s and 80s, as well, when I was growing up type thing, going through school, there wasn't a lot of people that it wasn't visible to us, with disabilities and that. And I think now we see, as I get older, I notice more and more, and I notice a lot of issues and that people with disabilities have. And it's sad because when you're younger, you don't see that. But unless you have disabilities. So I think this is really, really enlightening. And I believe also another way of addressing it is to address it through the school system too, that there are people with disabilities. And when you grow up, as you're younger, you look at people with disabilities, ha, 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 type of thing, right? And I think that the respect needs to be there for people with disabilities. And I believe also through education that to the younger people, just like we do with everything else, with climate change, and that we start them young in fire and everything to explain how that all works. And I believe education is really, really important. So anybody else have any thoughts? Because we kind of merged them all together in our thoughts, but thoughts on how to address these barriers? Anybody else want to add anything to that? How else will we address it other than changing our infrastructure, maybe through our bylaws as we go along, and through master planning and stuff like that in our communities? So does anybody else have anything else? Go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks. I think to Jamie's point, and I don't know if this belongs here, so I won't take the floor too long, but when we were talking about education, that's where my thoughts went with respect to addressing the barriers, physical or attitudinal, and maybe relying on, having a presentation, because I think sometimes too, having something set up, like I know that through different workshops and things that I've been to on a much smaller scale, having people have some empathy for what it's like to come to a presentation where, you put on glasses where you actually now are visually impaired. And you try navigating in this wheelchair. And these are some of the things that, we have done. And I think that when people have a real sense of, And there are resources provincially that we don't have to do the heavy lifting on the education piece. And I was thinking specifically through the Rick Hansen Foundation. I know they have ambassadors that will do training. And it was actually a hope of mine to have someone maybe present at like our annual general meeting for our agency. But I mean, more broadly, I mean, having someone come, I mean, Cindy, maybe we could actually get Rick Hansen here himself. That would probably be a draw. I think bringing the attention to it in a way that can be fun and engaging while you're presenting a really important thing. That's sort of where my thoughts went with respect to improving things. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Nicole. I agree with you. My education is theater, and it's very theatrical to go through the experiences. And I believe that experience is really important. And same as if you're blind or something like that, you have to trust whoever's if you're with someone, you have to trust. You have to trust if you have a dog, you know, you have to trust that person. And we used to do where we would fall back and somebody would have to catch us. You have to trust that person's going to catch you, otherwise you're hitting the floor. So wheelchair, same thing, you have to trust. So I agree with you. And Rick Hansen would be a great person to bring into our community. And he has been here before, and we could bring him again. Anybody else have comments?
Kind of going back to what Nicole was talking about, the barrier for their upgrade or whatever. When you're talking about the city's master plan, will like this type of plan be overlaid, like the disability access be overlaid with the city master plan, or how policies are updated in like the city? Because I'm sure or whoever is approving this change must have like a policy that they're reading off of. And will policies ever be updated to reflect like access for upgrading access for people with disabilities?
I sure will now. If it's not, no, we do have bylaws and we do have policies, and the master plans should be able to address that. We will make sure that happens. Sarah's going to bring this back to the city anyways at the same time and if that doesn't happen, we'll just stamp it with the council. So it should be, and all communities should have that. That's why we have this committee now. And because we have to come up with an accessibility plan amongst the municipality as well as the regional district. So it's very important. And to me, it means a lot. Okay, so thank you for that. Anybody else? Yes, go. Oh, do you want to put your speaker on?
I just have a comment in the chat from Beta. She had to attend another meeting. Thanks everyone for their research and ideas. She just noted here that people have fear and resistance where something's not familiar or understood. Increasing visibility of disabled citizens is key to acceptance and respectful interactions. In school, she noticed that where a student was visibly disabled and supported respectfully, the other students were accepting and became aware and respectful of diverse needs. Public messaging on transportation in public buildings and public spaces could help.
And thanks for that, Rita. I know you're not there, but I agree with you. And that's where I came in with the education. It has to start from the young ones, and it'll go to the next generation as we pass. I think it's really important. So I agree with that. And anybody else? No? Okay, let's move on. Next, back to the consultants.
Sure, yeah. So I think I'm just trying to unraise my hand now, but not finding a button. That's fine. Ignore the fact that my hand is up. I've got multiple screens going. But anyways, I thank you for all of your feedback. And I think a recurrent theme, both explicitly stated, but I think implicitly demonstrated, is that idea around increasing visibility of disability and expanding the idea of what it means to be disabled. So, you know, Deanna, I take your point where, you know, in some level of like the progression of your illness, you will appear more or less disabled, and you could have good days and bad days as well. And so the fact that you get to determine for yourself, no, I live with disability, these are my needs. But if people are, and Rick Hansen is, a great ambassador of disability, but that's one visual perception of what it means to be disabled. And so a lot of people will say, unless you're using sign language, you have, an intellectual disability that's visual, like Down syndrome, or you're in a wheelchair, I assume you're not disabled and that you don't have needs. And so I think that that's going to be a key element of overturning attitudes and perceptions, is not only expanding who might be disabled and what it can look like to be disabled, but also who is impacted by accessibility broadly. And I think the results of our survey are clear. The demographic of people who chimed in, the 31 to 55-year-old range, many of them may live with disabilities, but I bet a lot of them are thinking from the perspective of, I am a caregiver either of a child, a parent, or both, who are impacted by accessibility needs. And so, I believe it was Jamie who made the comment about the thoughts of universal design. It really does need to have that mindset, because it's not just the person living with a disability, it's their whole support apparatus, it's their friends, it's their family, it's their network that then can't go to a movie, go to a park, carry out, doctor's appointments in ways that they need to. And so it's more than just people with disabilities who are impacted. So I think expanding the idea of who is disabled, what it means to be disabled, who else is impacted by barriers to accessibility in that support network. And the sort of elephant in the room that a lot of people don't acknowledge is that the reality is that for people who are not disabled, I'd say they're not disabled yet. Over the lifespan, you are going to encounter disability. And so to expand the idea of this is actually a relevant issue for all of us, whether it's as relevant for you today as it's going to be 10 or 20 years from now, it is relevant. And so I think that'll be a key component of the education piece of, removing the stigma, increasing the visibility. How easy is that in terms of framing that as concrete recommendations for the accessibility plan? It's tricky, but it's developing those relationships. It's developing that messaging. It's the city and the region putting forward, not just publishing the plans, but promoting the plans. Hey, we're excited. Look at the work that we're doing. Here are the commitments that we're making, that I think will be really key to the successful implementation, not only of the goals of this plan, but increased engagement, buy-in, and enthusiasm for future plans, because they're going to come every 3 years. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, because we're just really into kind of a question and answer period right now. And so I will turn the mic either back to the chair or to Heather or Sarah for things that we may want to address during this sort of question and answer period, or in anticipation of the next phase of this work.
Haley, just a question about the survey. Did you have anybody reach out to you to have the survey done through sign language interpreter?
No.
Okay.
No request for that.
Okay, and I know, Kristen, you did one survey on the phone. Is that it?
Yes, just the one.
Okay. Yeah, so I feel like that maybe missed the mark, and we didn't advertise those services as well. So that's yeah, go ahead, Sue.
So regarding anybody, the White Cane Society, they reached out to the city, sent me an email of their issues and that, but a lot of it, the city, I sent it to our CAO, and he moved forward and sent it to the departments that could help and go through the survey and fix it all up. So I don't know, Sarah, if you know more about that than I do. So I will double check, because it was an easy fix.
Yeah, and that type of feedback is welcome all the time. We do have form on the regional district website, so people can fill it in electronically. They can also phone us, city or the regional district, to provide specific input, and those items will be forwarded on to folks that can deal with them. So yeah, that can come in any time.
So, and just so people know, the White Cane Society are people who have disability issues. Either they can't see or they can see very limited, and that's who they are, just so you know. And it's quite interesting, because all the issues that came out of the survey regarding infrastructure, like branches might be hanging over the sidewalk and stuff like that, the city just went and trimmed them down. So that's what came out of that little email that I received. So we're dealing with it in the city, part of it. So do you want, so I guess what the next question would be, what's the next steps? Do you take this and what happens now?
Great. So I think I don't want to speak on behalf of the project team on the other side, but it may be, well, let's see. Heather, would you prefer to open this up for discussion about next steps here or maybe behind the scenes? I will say what we intend to do, what we hope to do is, again, take all of these identified barriers and issues that have been raised and draft recommendations that we will then share with the city and the region to say, this is kind of where the arrow is pointing in terms of what we would recommend adopting in the accessibility plans. And so I'll let Heather maybe speak to timelines or how we might then be able to share some of those recommendations with the committee to provide their impact to see if we've, accurately captured and reflected the needs and made pragmatic but meaningful recommendations. So we've got just over a month to take it from, us drafting the recommendations to sharing it with the region and the city and then getting it to the committee. So Heather, do you have a sense of what that looks like yet, or is that something that we'll follow up with the committee on?
That all sounds good, Haley. Yeah, I envision, some more analysis of the survey. Left Turn, Right Turn is also reviewing all of our official community plans, any internal documents that we have, any policies about accessibility, and really coming up with recommendations on where there's holes in our program. So it sort of goes beyond the public feedback, but it goes back to our internal documents. And I think the next step would be for our committee to meet in May and be presented with some of those draft recommendations and allowing the committee to provide input before the plans are drafted and presented to City Council and the regional board. So that I anticipate will happen in May. We do have a meeting scheduled for May 7th, and one of the topics I wanted to bring up was delaying that meeting by 1 week for a couple different reasons that would give Haley an extra week to come up with this information. But also Chair Solda is not available the meeting that we had scheduled. So if anybody could provide some feedback on would May 14th at 10 a.m. work for our next meeting. This will be our last meeting with Left Turn, Right Turn. I know it works for staff and the contractor, but I'm looking for committee members' input.
Is there anybody not agreeing to that or they cannot make that date? Okay, seeing none, that's fine. Just to let you know, the reason I can't make it is because I'm in a conference in Penticton for the city for a week.
Okay. So Haley, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what we would aim to do is then send out the draft recommendations with the agenda, if we can, if we're able to align that timing so that committee members have time to actually review and, they're not responding on the fly, but they can have that time to read, review, and respond and maybe come with specific notes or guidance. And understanding, of course, that your feedback is important to the process. So we appreciate the, extra time and dedication that it will take to participate in that process.
And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight was next meeting will be the last meeting that Left Turn, Right Turns with us. They've been hired to start our accessibility committee so we can get off on the right start, but also to prepare our accessibility plan. But going forward, we won't have them with us, so it'll just be a smaller group. We do not have our next meeting scheduled. I think I'd like to get a little farther in the process and potentially at the next May meeting, we can pick our dates for the remainder of the year, and that'll be on a quarterly basis. And then we can sort of have a discussion too about how we want to proceed with these meetings. What are the things that we want to focus on? I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of recommendations in the plans, and we'll want feedback from the committee on a continual basis. So we'll chat further about that on how to proceed.
So everybody's good with that. Any more questions? Any more comments? Seeing none? Okay. So any late business? Nobody has any late business? And there's nobody from the public online, is there?
No, there are no emails in the response box and nothing in the chat.
Super. Okay, so next meeting is on the 14th. So May 14th at 10 a.m. Mark it in your calendars and we'll send out a reminder. And thank you for everybody that gave up your busy day, and to our consultants, thank you very much, and staff, thank you. And next, okay, move for adjournment. Anybody? And by Nicole, and second, we don't need a second on that adjournment. It's all good. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy your day.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Take care. Bye-bye.